Hello, welcome to Vintage Times. My name is Kathy Rager and I am your host. As Senior Services Coordinator for Downers Grove Township, I try bringing important information and topics of interest to local residents, but most specifically seniors. Township Senior Services strives to be a resource and referral service for older adults and their families. We use as many avenues as possible to share this information, including our township website and the Banner News. The Vintage Times television show continues to be a very important part of this. On our last program, we had a discussion about senior scams and frauds with some personal examples from our guest, Robert Petranek. Whether you've been a victim of identity theft, IRS phone calls, mail fraud, mortgage scams, or other scams, today's program will continue this important discussion with one additional guest. Please join us and raise your awareness on what's happening and how to avoid it. I'd like to welcome back our guest from our first program, Robert Petranek.
Hello.
And if you could say a little bit something about yourself, I'd appreciate that.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me back again, Kathy. I am on the Downers Grove Township Seniors Advisory Council, and I am a board member with the Friends for Downers Grove Township Seniors. Those organizations work on providing services to seniors in the community and helping do things like reducing the cost of the Dial-A-Ride program, and also just getting communications out there for valuable information for seniors.
Well, thanks for coming back again this week. Also, I have an additional guest, Tom Brady. He is the Associate Dean and Director of the Homeland Security Training Institute, which is a mouthful, out at the College of DuPage. And can you tell us a little bit about who you are, what your background is?
Well, thank you, Kathy, and thanks for having me. So I'm the Associate Dean, as you said, for the Homeland Security Training Institute at College of DuPage. So all of the programs that are under that program, I have responsibility for. I've been with the College of DuPage for 5 years. Prior to that, I spent 26 years in federal law enforcement, working with the United States Postal Inspectors, investigating crimes that involve the U.S. mail. So it's been a great transition for me to go from law enforcement into building a Homeland Security program at College of DuPage, and I'm just thrilled to be there.
Wow. And Robert, I know that some of the inspiration for some of the things you do have really come from the Training Institute. Can you elaborate just a little bit on that?
Sure, yeah. Well, through the township, actually, with HANA, I originally had found out about the programs that were held at the HSTI, and also the Citizens Public Safety Academy offers a wealth of information, too, through College of DuPage. So I've learned a lot. That's how I got to know Tom, and have really gotten quite an education on all sorts of topics that are important to seniors regarding crime and issues that are prevalent today.
Can you elaborate a little bit? I heard him mention the Citizens, what is it, Citizens Prevention Academy? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it's the Citizens Public Safety Academy, and we run that every summer. We're always looking to create programs where we can bring in community members, and specifically senior citizens, to get their hands on something that maybe they haven't had a chance to do before. That program is always free, because I always look for grants. I'm always trying to find grants so I can have people come in from the public to take courses, to get some education that they may need, but not have to pay for it. So that's one that specifically is covered by a grant that I get every year, and we can have up to 30 people in that class. And what it is a look inside public safety. So 1 week we might talk about police officers and our police academy. 1 week we might talk about firefighters and what they do. Emergency managers. We take tours of the DuPage County Jail and the coroner's office and DUCOM, which is DuPage County's 911 center. So we try to do a lot of classroom and a lot of hands-on things as well, and take tours. We do that every summer for 8 weeks. We only take 30 people. So it's very much a sought-after program, and we're just thrilled to do it. This is the 4th year this summer that we're doing that program, and we always get a great response, and it's great for the citizens to participate.
So it's already started for the summer, so they would have to join next summer. But do you have anything coming up soon that people could attend?
We do, yes. That's a summer program, so I would have your listeners make sure they put that on their schedule for next year. We usually start marketing that in the spring, so sometime around April, we put the message out there and we start taking applicants for that program. That's for the Citizens Public Safety Academy. We also, every quarter at the college, we do a community senior citizen crime prevention workshop, talking about anything such as frauds and scams and any type of fraud, identity theft, Medicare fraud, different types of scams that are out there. We try to educate the public, and we do that. We have one coming up in October. I believe it's October 20th. Again, absolutely free, so it's a great deal.
Yeah.
And this one's going to be on cybersecurity. So we do a lot of education in different areas, and the one we're looking at in October is on cybersecurity.
So cybersecurity, like internet, on the internet,
Correct.
is that
Yeah.
correct? What I'm thinking the subject is? Okay.
Yeah, somebody who's actually trying to use the internet to distribute malicious codes or infect your computer. A lot of cybersecurity starts there. And we're also going to talk about cybersecurity careers, because there's an overwhelming demand for people in that field right now. It's really one of the only fields where there is absolutely zero unemployment if you have a cybersecurity background.
Wow. Well, I imagine there's a lot of seniors out there that, there's probably a varying degree of, capacity for seniors that are very good at the internet and some that aren't. So it's probably very helpful to have those classes to better understand what it is that they're looking at or how to go about it. What type of scams are primarily committed, say, via the Postal Service? You said you were part of the Postal Service before.
I was. There's many different scams that postal inspectors have worked very hard to root out of the United States mail. Back in the day, it used to be lottery and sweepstakes mailings. Identity theft is still a problem, not only with the United States mail, but really everywhere on the internet, possibly in the mail. Different areas, identity theft. There's a lot of different mail fraud cases that the inspectors work. We've worked some very high-profile mail fraud cases in that organization. A couple of examples would be Governor George Ryan and Governor Rod Blagojevich. Both were investigated by the Postal Inspection Service because of mail being involved in those cases. So really, mail it gets everywhere. So there's about 200 different federal statutes that postal inspectors investigate that are related to the U.S. mail. But their inspectors do a great job of rooting frauds and scams out of the mail, but also educating people. That's really our best weapon.
Yeah, I think education, that's one of the reasons we're doing these programs. That's one of the reasons we've done a 2-part series, because we feel this is so important, not just to the average citizen, but for seniors. Can you elaborate on it a little bit, Robert, on why it would be so important for seniors to, maybe understand what some of these scams are, or why they might tend not to understand what's going on?
Sure. Well, they're constantly evolving, and there's always new twists on old scams that are perpetrated. But the general thing is always to just consider where your information may be used and what advantage might be taken with private, sensitive information. The big ones obviously are your Social Security number, mother's maiden name, different commonly used pieces of information that can be then used to take credit out in someone's name and use it, illegally. So that's a good example.
And getting back to, the Postal Service, you don't always think of it. I mean, we all get mail, and we all get different types of things in the mail. Is mail fraud just as prevalent now as it was in the past? Or is it more prevalent now than it was in the past?
Sometimes people say now that there's internet fraud, and do postal inspectors get involved in investigating anything related to internet fraud? And how can mail fraud play into that? Well, if somebody uses someone else's credentials to get credit and commit identity theft, and they go online and they're ordering something, if it's delivered by the U.S. Postal Service, then there's a U.S. mail nexus to that. So even crimes that are committed on the internet, the postal inspectors are very much involved in. The mail fraud statute in this country was enacted in 1872. It's one of the oldest federal statutes that's on the books. And really, it was designed for, United States Postal Inspector because they worked frauds and scams during the Civil War. So that's when that was enacted in 1872. And now, look at in 2018, there are still mail fraud cases that inspectors are working. Sometimes they're large cases, sometimes they're small cases, but postal inspectors do a great job. And I always tell people, if postal inspectors are on the case and if you mess with the mail, you're going to go to jail.
Yeah. Well, the federal government right there. And I think sometimes, thank you for making that connection, because when you think of the internet these days, it's almost, we're kind of thinking of that separately, because people get emails and, like you say, there's so many websites up and you're ordering things. But it's good to know that the federal government's got your back on that one. What types of things are, say, red flags that potential victims should be aware of?
Well, anything that sounds unrealistic, first and foremost, is a huge red flag. You always say if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. I don't say it usually is. I say it always is. That should be a red flag right then and there. If you're getting some correspondence and the grammar's really bad, sometimes the phishing emails where fraudsters try to make something look like it might be a business, that's phishing. They're trying to get someone to bite, on that. So it's almost like the phishing you do in a boat, but you're doing it on the internet.
I'd heard of that. So is that spelled the same way?
No.
It's like a
PH. It's PH phishing, not FISHING. But what it is the same idea. They try to send out as many of these emails as they can because they want people to fall for it. So it may look just like, I do business with Bank of America. I've gotten emails, it looks like the Bank of America logo. And they may be asking for something to verify, and I know that that's a scam, and I'll report it because I know that my bank already has my information. So sometimes they just don't make sense when you break them down, these scams. So you got to look for things that just aren't right. You have to have kind of a sense of, this doesn't seem like it's there's something I'm not comfortable with in this transaction or whatever the event is, and that's a real red flag.
So how do I know, we're going to be posting something at the end too, some numbers to call, but, if, there's so many emails that we get, and I understand completely what you're talking about, that you're not sure if you're going on the real website of that organization, and you're trying to look for, maybe, something that looks similar but isn't, how do people find out about that? How do they check that out?
Contact the company. First and foremost, contact the company. If I mentioned Bank of America, if I had a question, I would call the bank. You've heard about the IRS scam. That's usually around tax time that comes out where the IRS, you get an email from the IRS saying you owe money or a phone call from the IRS saying that you owe money. That's not how the IRS does business. And so you have to be leery of things that come across that just don't really make a lot of sense. And if you really break them down, these are just scams. They're just frauds and they're scams. So you have to really have your antennas up to make sure that you're safe.
Well, I know I've heard about a current scam that's going on right now that's probably very important for the Illinois residents to know a little bit about. And I think, Robert, you were talking a little bit about that locally to people. Was it involving
the
Medicare?
Yeah, sure. Well, for the first time in its history, Medicare is issuing new Medicare cards, and they are going to be non-intelligent numbers, is the phrase I saw. What that means is the numbers themselves don't reveal any information about the participant in the program. Like Social Security cards, those numbers, when they were issued, it's my understanding that there are identifiers in the numbers that might give the government an idea that you were a male born at a certain time in a certain state with the actual numbers. These Medicare cards won't have that. And in the scam that's happening right now in Illinois is scamsters are calling and saying, your Medicare card, the new one's on its way, but you need to pay for a temporary card in the interim, and that'll be $50, and I can take your information right now as a gap a bridge between your current card and the new card. There is no need for a bridge card. You'll be getting your new card when you do, and then you will be using that in place where you use the old one. So that's a current scam that
Yeah, and what numbers were on the current Medicare card? Was that their Social Security number that's currently on theirs?
Yes, it's my understanding that current Medicare or the old Medicare cards did have Social Security information on them, and that's going to be changed. They will no longer have those on there.
Okay, so they should just be watching for their cards. And I understand that I think it started as of this month for Illinois residents in June.
I believe that's true, yeah.
And it goes through April of 2018, I believe.
Yep.
Okay, so they should be expecting to get their card in the mail, but not be looking for
2019.
anyone else to contact them or ask for money. It's
Yeah.
free.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you. So regarding online scam artists, do they have a greater ability to commit fraud and get away with it than other fraud situations?
I think the internet allows scammers to have a greater ability, but I don't think it allows them to get away with it. And the reason for that is because there's a lot more education now on these frauds and scams than there was ever in the past. And you can Google these things and find out right away if there's a fraud or scam related to it. So it's pretty easy to get the information, and people really need to protect themselves. So I think that the internet's kind of a vast area where they could send out 1,000 phishing emails, but because of the education and because of people being more alert to these things, less of a chance for someone to become a victim. And I think that's a good thing, because I think that people that are educated, that's their best tool to stay safe. So that's what we try to do at the Homeland Security Training Institute is give people a lot of education and give people things that will keep them safe. And that's one of the reasons why I think that, these scammers are eventually they're going to be gone.
Well, I think as people get this information, and we share this information a lot, and often, and in many avenues, I think that people will be able to kind of get past this. So how do folks stay informed about the latest cons that are being perpetrated out there? Not just in, online, but, just cons in general.
Well, I think that they need to find out and seek out places where there's workshops on these things. We offer workshops at the College of DuPage. We bring in a lot of seniors, and again, we don't charge people for that because it's more of a community event. Seek those things out. Do some research. I always say that if somebody is really hot and heavy to get you to invest in something, tell them to wait. If that's something you're interested in, and research that company. Just take your time, because there's no rush. If they say the offer's today and then it's gone away, well then say, well, okay, well then it's gone away for me, because if these scammers will try to rush people into things. So if they can slow down, research it a little bit, they're going to be much, much safer. So I think that's one of the things. Research it. Go on the internet. Look at the Better Business Bureau website. Look at the Federal Trade Commission, because they're the agency that collects all the complaints around the country. So there's a lot of things you can do just to make sure that you're safe.
Yeah. Just to interject, there's two factors that will always be a component of a scam: fear or greed. If you can make a quick buck doing something, that's a tantalizing type of proposition for people. You can bolster your retirement savings, get-rich-quick type idea, but with regard to savings for your retirement. And then there's also the other angle where the police are going to come and get you if you don't do what we say right now. Those two things, fear and greed, are some of the biggest motivators behind why people will go along with a scam.
So this question is for both of you then, kind of leading off of that. What makes some seniors or older adults, or just anyone really, more vulnerable to some of these situations? Are there some that are more vulnerable?
There are. And that's what scammers try to do, is they try to focus in on that collective group because they know they have a better chance of being successful in their scam. And there's several different reasons. Trusting, I think seniors are a lot more trusting than they should be. I think they should be able to say no. Sometimes it's hard for some seniors because they weren't raised that way. They were raised in a generation where people were trusted, and I think that's certainly one thing that they could do that will make them safer.
Mm-hmm. Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I think that they just, a lot of seniors were raised in a time where you were taught to be very polite and have more of a reserved way of dealing with people, and I think it might be harder for them sometimes to just hang up the phone and say, "Leave me alone. I don't want to hear from you anymore. I know what you're doing isn't in my interest." It's maybe harder to articulate that. And other seniors, there's memory issues with some older seniors. There's loneliness issues. There's sometimes people just want to hear a friendly voice on the other end of the line and be talking to them. It depends. You have so many different factors involved. As we age, different conditions occur that can make us more susceptible or more vulnerable to nefarious practices.
And Kathy, to add to that, and I think Robert brings up a great point. Seniors oftentimes, they've accumulated retirement or a nest egg. Scammers know that. I'm going to go after seniors because they may have more money than someone who's 18 years old. So it's an attractive target for them because they're trying to be able to scam people that may have more money, and also because seniors may be embarrassed to even report being scammed. I can tell you that whatever numbers are out there in terms of how many people are victims of fraud every year, it's way more than that because there are people who have been taken advantage of who have not reported it. So the important thing is if there's a scam that someone attempts to defraud you, you got to report it. You have to report it because that's the way the police officers can do their job. They gather up a lot of information. If you don't report it, then no one's going to know about it.
Yeah.
And sometimes seniors are embarrassed by that.
Right. They have to build up a database. If they've got cases that are very similar to what just happened, then a trend starts to develop and be visible rather than one-offs that are happening selectively.
So so kind of what I hear both of you saying is that seniors might feel embarrassed, and be afraid to report it, or maybe feel that nothing will be done about their report because as elusive as it is to try to track down these individuals, at least if you're building data, then you have something to say, okay, here's the newest scam. We can inform older adults and others, about what's happening and how to avoid it. So if you can't catch them, at least you can know how to avoid them. Is that kind of what you're saying, too?
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Wow. So kind of, leapfrogging on that, how do seniors protect themselves then from potential dangers? Are there best practices involved in this?
There are. They need to, first of all, take their time. Sometimes, again, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but not to feel rushed. Do your homework. Seniors should do their homework just like anyone else if they're going to be involved in, even if they're purchasing something on the internet. There's a lot of sources out there you can go to find out if a business is legitimate or not. The Small Business Administration is one of them, the Federal Trade Commission, the Better Business Bureau. I have friends at the Better Business Bureau, and that's just an awesome organization because that's where I go if I want to find out if a company is legitimate or not. And if there's complaints, generally you can just Google it because if there's any complaints, they're going to be all over the internet. If there's a phone number that you keep getting and you're not sure if it's a scam or not, Google it because if other people have been defrauded using that, it'll be there. So they just have to take time, not be very trusting, not be too trusting. And then also if you have a parent who's maybe elderly or a relative who's elderly, look for any signs that they may be taken advantage of because they may be too embarrassed to tell you about it.
So, and I think that if we also are more aware of the older adults living in our neighborhoods and our community, some might be more, have less family around, maybe their family live in other states, which seems to be a lot more common these days, that they can reach out to a neighbor, reach out to their village and the organizations that you mentioned. And even, at our township, with our senior services as coordinator there, we do get a lot of seniors that come into our township office and just ask questions. And a lot of them have to do with security, or what can I do in a particular situation. And we, again, being more of a resource and referral, we can refer them out to you guys, refer them out to different organizations that can help them or, give them some names so they can check out, different situations they might be up against. So I think that's really important to point out. What are ways to verify? I mean, I think you already touched on this, but verifying the validity of a company would be the Better Business Bureau then? That would be the...
That's one source. That's a great source. The Federal Trade Commission, if there's complaints that have been lodged against a particular company, they may have that in their database because they have a big database full of complaints that people have been targeted for. The U.S. Postal Inspection Service, you can go to their website and get a lot of information on frauds and scams. But I think when you're talking about companies, Small Business Administration, the Better Business Bureau, Google, you're going to find out information on that company.
So
for sure.
Google is our friend.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Now,
And then
another thing I'd like to bring up just briefly too is that a lot of seniors, maybe there's seniors out there that don't have a computer, that can't Google it or whatever. They might be a little bit more isolated in that respect, and that's probably more of the maybe the more seniors, 73, 74 and above versus the baby boomer generation coming in. How how can we? Other than reaching out in our own neighborhoods, what other ways that we can reach out to them? Is there anything you can suggest, or is there anything we can do, for them?
Well, I think you can also, if there's younger family members, they can go to a younger family member. If I had a question about the internet, I'm going to go to my, if I had a 15-year-old son or daughter, I'd go to them because they know the internet probably way better than I would. So they can go to them and have those relatives help them. But they just got to be able to speak up, and sometimes they don't. But I think that's a good way. Or you can contact, if you think something's a fraud, you can contact your local police department, and you can talk to someone over the phone just to verify whether something is legitimate or not.
Well, thank you for that. And then can you tell us, are there any other summary of the programs that you offer, or something that you would like to, let us know, or let our audience know that would be important for them?
Yes, we do. These community workshops, as I mentioned before, I talked about the one in October.
Mm-hmm.
We do have one coming up in June. It's in a couple weeks. Again, it's free, and this one's going to be on community crime prevention. So we're going to have a couple of representatives from different police departments. This workshop will be the Naperville Police Department and the DuPage County Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. And they're going to be the speakers, and they're going to give information about community watch groups, things going on in those areas that they're seeing, especially the police officer side. If there's some trends or things that are developing in say, Naperville, for example, that would be something good, because if it's happening in Naperville, I guarantee it's happening in Downers Grove, it's happening in Lisle. It's all a very close community. So I think that's a good one, because, again, that's free, and I think that's on June 21st.
That's great. And they would find that information on the College of DuPage website?
That's correct.
Or Homeland Security Training Institute? Is there a website separate for that?
Well, it's part of the College of DuPage website, but if people went to www.cod.edu/HSTI, it'll take you right to the Homeland Security Training Institute portion of that website. And all of our programs are listed on there. And the only thing they would have to do is register, because we have a certain number of people that can come to that. But these are great presentations. And again, they're only 2 hours. So they go from 1 to 3. And we give out a lot of information, sometimes pamphlets. They'll walk away with something. And a lot of times it's just education.
I've been to a few of these, and they are just a wealth of information. And each time I've really thought to myself, I can't believe this is free. I can't believe it, because they're so well done. The speakers are very organized, and in 2 hours you get a ton of information through those programs.
Well, it sounds like we've got some great resources for people, and we're going to run them again at the end of the program as well. Some great sources for checking things out, some information and awareness that you guys have brought to the fore. The fact that you've attended some of these, and I know I actually attended one, a senior scam presentation out at the Institute there. So it really is a great resource for the community. It's free, it's local, and I think just bringing it local and making seniors in our area aware of what's going on, so that we can be helpful to them. So I do appreciate you guys coming out here today, to talk about this. Robert, Robert Petranek, he's with our Friends for Downers Grove Township Seniors, and we'll do senior scam presentations in the local communities. And then Tom Brady, who has blessed us with his presence, because he's got a very, very busy life and is constantly going around the country. But we really do greatly appreciate your being here and sharing this information with us today.
Thank you, Kathy.
So I just wanted to thank you for being here today.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.